We are coming to almost an end of this symposium about innovating better together. And I wanted to close the symposium with bringing to you somebody who is at the heart of the innovation. We've launched a partnership with Plug and Play, and Amir will tell you more about Plug and Play in a minute, but it'll give you an insight of how innovation is driven in the Silicon Valley. And more importantly, I think Amir will also give you challenges, and we'll give you a benchmark on how the aviation and the hospitality industry is doing in terms of innovation compared to other industries. So I would like to welcome on stage Amir Amidi, and from Plug and Play. He's leading the travel and hospitality practice at Plug and Play, and he will give you his insight on innovation. Please, a round of applause for Amir, please.
You know, I didn't know what to expect when I came to this conference. Getting here on Monday night, in no shape or form do we consider ourselves to be experts in the aviation industry. But, you know, having spent the past 48 hours here, I have to admit that I'm both pleasantly surprised at the challenges that this industry faces when I compare it to the industries that we're involved with. But I'm also very hopeful. You know, at Plug and Play, we think industries that are complex and face challenges every day, and industries that have money that could be spent towards innovation are the best industries to be disrupted. So I think aviation is no exception when it comes to that. So I'm really grateful to be here. I think I have a much, much better appreciation for the challenges folks in this room face every day. And I think I have a better idea of how innovation could help you guys going forward. And I wanted to thank our gracious host, IATA, for putting this event together, and our generous sponsor, Emirates Airlines. And by the way, how fun was that dinner last night? Let's hear a round of applause for that. So really quickly, I know we're running behind, and I'll try to get through these slides fairly quickly here, but quick background on Plug and Play. We are a global firm. We are based in Silicon Valley. We have about 400 startups that are headquartered out of our facility in Silicon Valley, but we think innovation comes in different shapes and forms and comes from all different sides of the planet. So what we've done is actually create a global network. We have about 10 offices in China. We have an office in Singapore. We have 2 offices in Germany, 1 in France, 1 in Mexico, and 1 in Brazil. So it is a spoke and hop model. A lot of our investments for our venture arm does come from Silicon Valley, but roughly 30% of our investments are actually on a global scale. So we are big believers that innovation doesn't solely take place in Silicon Valley. We have very, very humble beginnings. The picture you're looking at is a building that we own in downtown Palo Alto, right down the street from Stanford University. And by chance and luck, we were fortunate enough to have folks like Google, PayPal, Logitech, and Danger come to us for office space. And we noticed these companies go through hyper-growth modes in a matter of 12 months. And we realized soon after that providing them with just real estate solutions may not be the best return on our capital. So we actually decided to innocently take a chance and invest in them alongside of the VCs. And by pure luck, they ended up being fantastic investments for our fund. So fast forward to 2006, this picture that you're seeing here is back from 1999, I believe, when Google had about 40 employees in our building. They actually came to us with their 2 founders and 3 employees and grew to about 50 people in our building. So the investment in Google basically excited us about the opportunity, and we wanted to do it a little bit more strategically and systematically. So we ended up purchasing a larger facility in a town called Sunnyvale, right down the street from the Google campuses and Yahoo campuses. It's about 180,000 square feet facility, and the idea was to fill it up with early stage technology companies that would give us a bird's eye view into about 300 investment opportunities at any given time. And we thought having continuous dialogue with these CEOs who are housed out of our facility would expose us to better investment opportunities. So instead of waiting for the likes of Google to come to us for office space and investing in them, we wanted to have an ecosystem that provided us with a bird's eye view into about 400 investment opportunities at any given time. That's year 2006. Today, our ecosystem, this is 10 years into our operation under the Plug and Play brand. We have roughly 6,000 startups in our ecosystem across different industries, and these are startups that we either invested money into or they were part of our ecosystem at some point during the past 10 years. We have about 130 corporate partners, and I'll talk a little bit more about that and how we work with these folks to help them with innovation. We started our travel and hospitality practice about a year ago, and roughly we have about 10 partners there right now. But all in all, we work with about 130 corporations and their innovation efforts. We invest in about 150 startups a year. The facility in Sunnyvale, our headquarters, facilitates about 30 or 40 investments a year. The rest are actually through our accelerator program as well as our global offices. But all in all, we do about 150 deals a year. We don't write big checks. Typically, our investment size is about anywhere on the low end, about $50,000, and a high end, $500,000 per startup per round. And venture capitalists, at the end of the day, every startup that we invest money into needs to raise additional capital. So we've gone far with the VC community to make sure that once the startup is ready for additional funding, they actually can get in front of the right VC and the right partner at the right time. So what does the ecosystem look like? I would say from this wheel you're looking at, investment obviously is a fuel to get something started. And again, we've been doing it actively since 2000. But the second most valuable service we realized about 10 years into our operations, I should say 7 years into our operations, is the corporate innovation. So once the startup has raised funding and they have a technology, a minimal viable product, eventually they need to sell that technology to folks like yourselves sitting in this room. So about 4 years ago, we started working with corporations and try to bring them into our ecosystem to basically bridge the gap between the innovators on one side, the startups, and the corporations on the other side. And I'll go a little bit into more detail how we do that. But I would say corporate innovation is a core service that we provide our startups with today. Networking, we do a lot of events at Plug and Play. Typically, we have about 300 events in our facility in Sunnyvale. They go a long way in getting exposure for our startup community. Logistical support, that's just office space, administrative support, conference rooms, and mentorship, obviously bringing people with experience into the ecosystem to help the startups go through the processes that they have to go through. People who've gone through those cycles before goes a long way in nurturing growth. And as most of you know, the startup life cycle is not a straight line. It's a very challenging one. Typically, during an average week, a startup has probably 3 or 4 very challenging days, and they're fortunate if they have one productive and easy day. So the mentorship program goes a long way in giving them hope and motivates them not to give up. This is a snapshot of our portfolio. So the companies you see on top, everything is ranked by valuation. Dropbox, Lending Club, and PayPal, those are the companies that ended up being unicorns for us. And by unicorns, we mean startups that ended up having over $1 billion valuation. And the way Plug and Play makes its money is through liquidation events. So once we invest in a startup and we help it grow, we're hoping that someday that startup will either go public or it will get acquired by a larger company. So the startups you see on top are the investments that we've seen great return on our capital on. The startups you see on the bottom of this slide are the startups that we actually spend a lot of time with. So our role is to help these guys increase their valuation by coming up with innovation, new products and services, and hopefully making deals with corporations that we're in touch with. What you're looking at here is actually a typical month at Plug and Play. So the blue boxes you see are essentially the corporations that come to us on a quarterly basis. And in a 2 to 3 hour session, we introduce them to startups that we think are relevant for their technology roadmap. So the likes of Samsung, Mercedes-Benz, I think Fairmont Hotels is on there. They visit us at least on a quarterly basis to meet startups that could help them with their IT infrastructure and technology roadmap. So travel and hospitality is not the only space we're focused on. We actually started out with brand and retail as the first focus area, and we were able to prove the model where you bring industry leaders and the startups around the same table, tremendous value can be created. So in our brand and retail practice, we were lucky enough to work with folks like Target, Tesco, Kohl's, Procter & Gamble, and eventually we brought the same model into IoT, fintech, which I'll talk about a little bit later, health, and travel and hospitality. It is our baby right now. It is the youngest practice that we have. Mobility is a huge practice for us right now. We actually set up a joint venture with Mercedes-Benz out of Stuttgart, Germany, looking at technologies that are going to be surfacing in the next few years for connected car and self-driving cars. So how do we do this? Basically, we are searching the globe for the best innovators out there. What you're looking at on this slide is some of the channels that we utilize to find those startups. So VCs, the venture capitalists, if a startup is too early for them, they end up actually introducing that startup into our ecosystem. And if it makes sense for us to integrate them into our ecosystem, we do with funding as well as introductions to corporations. We spend a lot of effort on building relationships with governments. Early on, we thought governments would make a perfect partner for Plug and Play because everybody wants to have a piece of Silicon Valley in their backyard. So we build bridges with a lot of governments around the world, 40 to be exact. And the way we work with them is if there is an opportunity for the government to identify a startup that has potential to go global, we actually bring them to Silicon Valley and help them have a soft landing there. And vice versa. If we have a startup in Silicon Valley that has potential to go to Europe, and we actually take that up on ourselves to make sure the technology is valid, the business model is valid, and the teams actually can deliver on their promise. So this talks about our accelerator program. For each of the focus areas that we have, we run 2 accelerators per year. And typically for each accelerator program, we go through 1,000 startups. So based on our corporate partners' interests, we actually scour the world and we try to find somewhere between 500 to 1,000 startups that meet the corporate partners' technology interests. Then we do our due diligence on those 1,000 startups. In the case of travel and hospitality, as you can see here in the middle of the slide, we're looking at the entire travel cycle. So from the time of awareness and discovery to making a booking, which could be a long step, to being en route, to being on the ground at your destination, and finally post-trip. So what we're doing is looking at each stage independently as well as collectively to see how technology can enhance the passenger experience. What you're seeing on the left side of this slide is our existing partners, the people that we're working with, the corporations, to get a better understanding of what opportunities exist when it comes to innovation in the travel and hospitality market. So again, 1,000 startups every 6 months based on our corporate partners' interest. We do our own due diligence on those 1,000 startups, narrow it down to a list of 100, and then that list gets shared with our anchor partners. And they help us narrow that list down to about 30 or 40 startups. And then during something called the selection day, we actually invite our anchor partners and the startups to come in. And the corporate partners help us select about 20 startups to go through an accelerator program, which is a 3-month program. And during that time, the corporate partners and the startups get to interact with one another in many shapes and forms. Some may want to do partnerships, some may want to do POCs, some may want to do pilots with the startups. The more aggressive partners, like the JetBlues of the world, end up actually investing in some of the startups. In fact, JetBlue has invested in 2 startups that we introduced to them. Turkish Airlines which we've had a fantastic experience working with. They actually have done about 5 pilots with the startups we introduced to them. So either it's licensing a technology, piloting a technology, or direct investments in the startups, although less than 20% of our corporate partners actually end up making an investment. What you're seeing on the right-hand side is the startups that we've been affiliated with over the past 10 years in the travel space. As I will show you in this slide, the travel space has not seen much liquidity as far as the investment community is concerned. So a lot of the venture capitalists and private equity firms shy away from it, which actually was good for us because Plug and Play was named the second most active travel tech investor in 2015 by CB Insights. But this slide is a blessing as well as it's a little bit scary because it tells us that there has not been much innovation in the travel industry for the past couple of decades. You can argue OTAs have innovated to a certain extent. You can argue that the likes of Airbnb and Uber have disrupted the industry to a certain extent, but we're not seeing as much innovation in the travel and hospitality sector as we're seeing across other industries. But nevertheless, we have about 16 or 17 investments right now in the travel tech space, and our goal is to be able to invest in about 20 startups a year going forward in the travel and hospitality industry. So what are we focusing on? And these are themes that I think have been repeated throughout this conference, but we're huge believers in personalization. You know, putting the right offer in front of the right passenger at the right time. We think we're far from it, but we think by working with corporations like airlines, hotels, OTAs, cruise lines, rental car companies, by using existing data, historical data, as well as data that exists out in the cloud today, we should be able to personalize the service to a great extent. Seamlessness, it's basically providing a more efficient way for people to be able to book their travels. Whether you're traveling on business or leisure, we think the booking process is actually broken. So we think there's a lot of room for improvement there. Ancillary revenues, I think it's self-explanatory. How can someone like JetBlue step outside of their core business, provide value-added services to their passengers, and hopefully increase the wallet share of that passenger? So we're looking at opportunities like that. Brand loyalty, how can we entice passengers to be excited about joining a brand or a loyalty program associated with a brand? I think I speak for all of us that when we join a loyalty program, we do it because we have to sometimes. I don't think we're proud of it. We do it for the perks, but nobody's really proud to be part of any loyalty program today. And this is not unique to the airline industry. I think it's true with the hospitality industry as well. So how can a brand actually make its offering more sticky and make people want to join the loyalty program instead of having them feel like they have to get a certain level of service? Operational efficiencies, self-explanatory. How can technology help airlines, hotels complete repetitive tasks in a more efficient manner? And then what we're really excited about is disruptive ideas. Disruptive ideas come around for an industry like yours, luckily every 10 or 15 years, if they do. So just as a side note to tell you the mistakes we've made as Plug and Play, we had a chance to invest in Airbnb at a $2.5 million valuation, and we actually signed a term sheet. And just to put that in context, Airbnb is worth about $30 billion right now, which means if we would have put $100,000 in back then, it would have been worth about $150 million today. Last minute, we got cold feet. We thought that if somebody gets hurt in these apartments, the company can go under. At the time, they had 600 destinations on their platform. So we walked away from the deal, and we still lose sleep over not investing in them. But the important thing for us is by focusing on travel and hospitality, we're hoping to be able to recognize innovation like that. Innovation like Airbnb that during the first days didn't get much attention from the hospitality folks, but today I think It's definitely got the major hotel brands shaking in their boots as far as what they can do in the future. As it relates to aviation, I think Hyperloop is an interesting one. It's still in its infancy stage, but it definitely is a form of transportation that could disrupt getting from point A to point B for short haul flights. So that is another technology we're watching very, very closely. So this slide, I think this was referred to by other speakers as well, but the takeaway here is that global digitalization is changing the landscape. No longer having hard assets necessarily means that you're creating value or your company's valuation is going to be based on the assets that you own. It may help you with your lenders, it could look good in the eyes of the bank, but when it comes to how markets treat valuation of corporations, the landscape has changed. Uber was referred to as the world's largest taxi company that doesn't own a single taxi. But some other interesting ones, TripAdvisor, the largest travel company in the world that holds zero inventory. Alibaba, the most valuable retailer in the world that holds zero inventory. Someone like Netflix, that is the largest movie house but doesn't own any cinemas in the world. So this is not to say that everything you see on this slide applies to the aviation industry, but the takeaway here is that no longer having hard assets and just pure revenues from those hard assets necessarily gets you the valuations that companies like this get just because of the ecosystem they've been able to provide. So this is, I just thought it'll be worthwhile to spend 2 minutes on the types of innovations that at least we see taking place in the aviation industry. With the limited time, we focused on it. But obviously, product or service, a product or service that goes beyond a passenger's expectation and at the same time creates more revenue streams for the service provider. In our mind, the business class suites would be a good example of that. Although we think that's still an incremental innovation, we don't think it's a breakthrough or disruptive innovation. Process, increasing the bottom line, lowering costs, increasing employee satisfaction. There's a company that we're actually considering an investment in by the name of Springshot, and they're actually working with Delta Airlines right now. What they do is for the frontline employees that touch an airplane when it comes up to the gates, so these are the people that fuel the airplane, clean the plane, provide other services once the plane comes to the gates, they've gamified the whole tasks that they take care of every day. And they actually have set up competitions between different people to see who can do their task better and faster. And they're actually in the process of rolling out their technology to Delta right now. Strategy, I think it's self-explanatory, but a good example would be Delta's profit sharing program, which may have something to do with their on-time status in 2015 and lower cancellation rates, but really giving your employees a way to have a stake in how they perform every day instead of just going through routine tasks. Innovation levels, what we've seen, at least with our limited time being focused on the aviation industry, we've seen some incremental, very little breakthrough, and pretty much no disruptive innovation in aviation industry. So what we're excited about, and again, having spent the past 48 hours here, is really trying to find out how we could work with the airlines as well as the startups to find some disruptive technologies out there. And walking away from this conference, I think that's more possible than ever. This is just talking about how different industries are able to generate ancillary revenues outside of their core business. I don't think anything on this slide is something you guys are not aware of. Movie theaters, they don't make the majority of their profits from selling tickets. They actually make more money on selling popcorn and concessions. Airlines, you guys could say that you make your money from charging for baggage, but we don't consider that to be a experience-enhancing way of creating ancillary revenues. We consider it to be something that generates revenues, but it doesn't leave a good taste in the passenger or traveler's mouth. Rental car companies selling insurance or refilling the car, electronic retailers, another industry that has a very low margin, but they're able to generate additional revenues through selling extended warranties or installation plans. So I was asked to make a quick comparison to another industry that we're heavily involved with, and I decided to pick banking. Banking is a highly regulated industry. It's extremely competitive. The margins are not that great, but we've seen some innovation come out of it, believe it or not. When we started talking to the likes of Santander, Citigroup, Credit Suisse, getting these guys to come to the same room and talk about innovation and talk about their IT roadmap was nearly impossible. They sent us NDAs that were literally 100 pages long, and over time, we were able to overcome their paranoia of talking about innovation with their competitors. I think at some point during this conference, the sharing of data was brought up, and the question was, who's going to own that data if we start sharing it and putting it out in the open? Banks thought the same way. But over the past 3 years, we've been able to actually get the top 16 out of the 20 largest financial institutions to actually come to the same room and talk about innovation and look at technologies that could help raise the tide collectively for the industry. And a great example of a company that we invested in Germany is a company called Number 26. Now they go by N26. These guys were able to navigate through the heavily regulated banking industry in Europe and help the millennials open up a bank account in less than 2 minutes on their mobile device. Right now, they're growing at about 10,000 accounts per day. Blockchain has been talked about a lot today, but we really think a breakthrough like blockchain technology, the security and efficiencies it brings into an industry, not just in the financial world, as well as the airline industry, is something that should not be ignored. Great example of a company that actually got collaboration across the board from different competitors in the financial world is called Chain.com. I advise you to check them out. But Visa, Capital One, Citi, NASDAQ, they all ended up investing in this company because they truly thought it's going to help raise the tide, if you will. So I think if it can be done in the banking industry, there's no reason why it cannot be done in the aviation industry. I think the intention is there based on the comments I've heard during the past 48 hours. I think the challenge again is gauging how do you gauge the success of an innovation program in an airline, which is very hard to do. It's something that takes a long time. I think it needs to have deliverables, but at the same time, I think it's the only way that you guys can help each other raise the tide in the industry. And it's going to take collaboration as well as real metrics and real deliverables to make it happen. And we hope with Plug and Play's involvement and IATA, we can make a difference on that roadmap. So that is my presentation. I believe we have a 3-minute video about our first selection day when we launched the travel and hospitality program. So if you can, go ahead and roll that video. Can you guys hear it? Maybe we can stop it and start it over again because we can't hear the people talking in the video. I promise the sound quality was better than that when we made it. Maybe while, oh.
board with JetBlue, and we've just joined as an anchor partner for the travel and hospitality sector here at Plug and Play. And we're using this as a wonderful way to be immersed in the ecosystem. We've actually moved offices here in Silicon Valley, and it's a great place for us to come to these pitch sessions and see some great startups, but then also interact with them over the course of their time while they're in the accelerator program. It's a really good place to just meet and spend time with the startups.
Really excited today. It's our first ever travel and hospitality selection day. We've got 28 startups, and what's really exciting about today is this is the first program where we've had 6 anchor partners on board before the actual launch.
So we've got Turkish Airlines, we've got Carlson Wagonlit, we've got JetBlue, Panasonic Avionics, Michelin, and Lufthansa.
So this just proves that we're in the right space, and this is a very hot topic, and we're excited to find some great investments today.
Plug and Play just became a really relevant scouting partner for us. We do scout startups ourselves, but it was a very nice day, so intense to have 27 really great travel startups in one room, getting an outside view from such experts as Plug and Play, compare that with our internal analysis, talking to those startups just at the lunch right now. It just really created a lot of value, and it was fun.
It's so great to see those new disruptors in our industry. We've seen a lot of these guys that addresses problems that we've already spotted, but also some that came with solutions we hadn't think about. So it opens up a lot of new exciting perspectives for us, and we are really looking forward to working with several of those guys.
We're looking for deal flow, actually. I mean, when I say deal flow, more innovation deal flow. We found that it's tough to reach startups who understand what we need in the niche part of our industry, which is at Panasonic Avionics. What we do is deliver in-flight and entertainment and broadband connectivity to airline customers who in turn provide it to their passengers. And what we want to do is leverage that network and know-how with startups that are thinking of new and different ways of doing things. And what we found coming to the Plug and Play today is that startups, these guys are having great ideas. And what we want to do is blend in what we can deliver to them to make the experience that much better.
Our job is to know our industry. Plug and Play's role is really to match industry players with new disruptors, and they're just the greatest platform for that to happen. So we've made our due diligence on different players, and it happened that from our very own perspective, Plug and Play was the right fit for us as a company, with our culture and with what we're trying to achieve.
We want to engage with startups in order to get their business idea into the airline business. Plug and Play's travel and hospitality event help us to scout startups that we can work with. They bring together the corporates and startups, and it's a key role for making open innovation happen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.